That's the kind of things that we have to focus on. So the context of where we're going to fight and how we're going to fight is something I want you to think about. I owe you this, right? I'm doing what I said I wouldn't do, and that I've read feedback. I actually read AARs, believe it or not. I read AARs, and I read things. And so this guy came up and talked at us for an hour. Well, I'm going to come up and talk at you for an hour, because the only time I get company commanders and first sergeants and leaders in one spot is this right here. I get one shot to talk a little bit about philosophy and vision, and that's a paragraph, and a little bit about how I think we're going to do it. So I want you to think about that, take it, internalize it. Nothing I'm going to say means I want you to shift and stop what you're doing. Nothing I'm going to say is going to stop your currently approved YTB from executing. There might be some ways we adjust it a bit. Nothing I'm going to say is going to change all the things you're tracking and measuring. I hope, not a method, but I hope if you do your job, implied task, you're going to hear me say this a lot. I hope you can take it and parse out the things that matter to you and ultimately remove some things from your plate, right? If you look at this thing deliberately, as I would, you'll be able to pull some things out and reduce some of the things. I hear a lot, right? I was a brigade commander, I was a battalion commander, I was a company commander a few times. And anything my leadership could do to take something off my plate, I appreciate it. What we've seen is we typically, if we pull something off, we add 3 more. And that's a problem. So help me manage that. And I really, really need the NCOs to help me manage that as we look at it. So the context that I'm talking through, and this is again, we talked compo, we talked service, and we talked joint force. I need you thinking that way, right? Do I want a squad leader thinking about his role or her role in the joint context? Probably not. I need a squad leader to think about how they're going to kill the enemy or do their job for their MOS, whatever that is, how they support that function. But I do need leaders who can think about the context of when we deploy, not if, when we deploy, how are we going to operate in that context with other services, other compos, and multinational partners? And if you deployed any time in the last 20 years, you'll know that we did a terrible job of deploying soldiers out. I think we did a good job, kind of, sort of, prep-wise. I'll give it a D. And we put them in a theater, and they saw a lot of things for the first time, right? From a cultural standpoint, nowhere near prepared. From an equipping standpoint, probably most of you, right, rhetorical question, don't have to answer, but how many of you walked into theater, think back, and then somebody said, oh, this is the thing you need. Well, what's that thing? Well, that's the EW device that's going to save your life. Well, should we train with that? No, just turn it on. It's pretty easy, right? But those two can't do it. They can't go because they don't have a secret clearance. Well, they're squad leaders. Well, too bad, right? You can probably imagine how that conversation went. So that's the kind of stuff we want to avoid. We sent soldiers downrange that weren't trained or equipped to do the mission they had to do, and that was in a counterinsurgency fight where we had time to prepare. We had time to prepare our soldiers. You know, we took Echo 125. I was a company commander the better part of 6 months to get them out the door at a MOB station, much less to train up prior to. Who thinks you're going to have 6 months for the next fight? That's good, because I would have probably drug tested you immediately. If you look at the things that the Army is asked to do, you saw yesterday Mike Price, Mr. Price back there, who is one of our few SAMS grads, by the way, in the state. I don't care what uniform he wears. He talked a little bit about National Defense Strategy, right? The things that drive, those source documents that drive what we do. We are not going to have time, and the Army is being asked to do things, dynamic force employment, right? Global employment, the global operating model, all the things that we think we are tasked to do as an Army. And so I'd ask you, if you get some free time, get on the high side and start burning through some of these, like the JSCAP and apportionment tables, and look at the things that the Army thinks we're supposed to do, that the Joint Staff says we're supposed to do. And then look at the units that are being asked to do that on paper and ask yourself if it's realistic. The context. Now let's talk about the threat. The threat as we see it right now. What is the pacing threat?
China.
Yeah, China, right? And I think it's important as you talk about the threat to distinguish, because we talk about the People's Republic of China, you should start thinking internally as kind of move that out and don't conflate that with the party, right? The CCP. That's the threat. Average soldier in the PLA who is a conscript, by the way, from pick your province, not part of the party, most likely. The CCP and what they do, that's the threat. The pacing threat, right? That's been defined as the peer pacing threat. I might argue, as you look at what that threat looks like from a capability standpoint, we call it a peer-to-peer fight in LSCO, large-scale combat operations. We're probably actually in an overmatch situation in more than one function. And if you don't think that's true, again, get on the high side and start looking at some of the things in SEMA, start looking at some of the things on the cyber side, start looking at tube-to-tube artillery, start looking at ship-to-ship, doesn't matter capability-wise, start looking at missile for missile and what they can do. They can outrange us, they outnumber us, and they can get standoff that we don't have right now. That's the pacing threat that a whole bunch of people have said is important for us to understand. That's the SecDef who said it, right, who we work for. That's Chief of Staff of the Army, prior and new. That's the Secretary of the Army. That's Chairman of the Joint Chiefs. That's all those folks. They're all those documents from POTUS on down. POTUS said it as well. So think about that threat. Now that's one context you have to think about. The context of that organization, the PLA, through the Communist Party, that said in 2027, this used to be something that wasn't public, but everybody throws it's on CNN now, right? 2027, that's like the line in the sand that we've drawn, that Xi Jinping has drawn, that says, three things, I think. This is me. I think he's got three criteria. He's looking at one that says, is my force ready for a joint fight, a joint forced entry, amphibious, cross the straits and hit Taiwan, right? The island of consequence in the theater, the primary theater. He's looking at that. He's got criteria. He has his own readiness centers, by the way. He's got NTC ×2, among other things that he's doing, and he's taken our lessons learned. And he is putting soldiers from the PLA into some theaters in the global south, doing things that he wasn't doing even 2 years ago. I think that the second thing he's looking at is Ukraine, hard, and the economic impacts of what we see as sanctions on Putin and the regime, and can he survive those in China? And he's thinking about things like, and by the way, if this room is the Chinese, the PRC's economy, that little square over there of the carpet is the Russian economy, right? So he's probably got some resilience. And the last thing he's looking at is you. He's looking at the U.S., allies and partners, and how can I fracture that network, right? How can I change the calculus so that they don't want to fight, the partners and allies don't want to fight? Do we have an Article 5 equivalent in the Indo-PACOM theater? No. Stephen, do we? We do not, right? We have some agreements with Japan. We have some agreements with South Korea. I think they have some of their own problems to deal with, right, with KJO. And we've got some agreements with some other countries here and there, all of which say, if you're in, we're in. But if you're not, well, that's going to be a tough day. So that's just one theater, but that threat is everywhere. The global south is dominated by China right now, absolutely dominated. All right, then we move on to Europe, and we see everything in the east, NATO's eastern flank. We know what's going on in Ukraine. We think we know what will happen if they're not successful there with the Baltics. He's driven 2 other countries into NATO. So, and I keep hearing maybe more concern. Every day I hear more and more, and I'm reading some things and threat perspectives that more and more interest in use of tactical nuclear weapons, like the unthinkable things we never used to talk about. Maybe that is thinkable, right? Those are things you should be thinking about. that threat. And then we get into Iran. The current crisis right now, Israel, Gaza, Iran, multiple proxies surrounding Israel. We know where the funds come from. We know what's happening with Iran. And then I've got North Korea, who's supplying everybody right now. So that's the context when I talk about things that I'm going to talk about from a man-equipped train standpoint. And I'm going to talk a lot about manning, right? Man, that is our priority. That's what I want you to think about, because the recruit you pull in today is somebody who might be a team leader or squad leader, 27, 28, 29, 30, right? We're manning for that fight right now. And that's because of the partners that we have an active interest with. And I think that's significant. We have to think about that partner, and you've seen that relationship go from 2 or 3 people, oh man, we don't want to talk about it, to a battalion formation and fixed wing platforms doing the things up in the 40 complex. So a lot of interest in Michigan, and the things you're doing are being seen in a very, very relevant way, and that's back to that whole deterrent thing that I'm talking about. So that's the picture I wanted to paint for you. I didn't even talk about VEOs, did I? Didn't talk about ISIS, didn't talk about everybody else who still wants to burn down the United States. We're not going to let them. But you have to think about it when you're thinking about manning your formation and training your formation and planning for the fight. It's not for this AT 2024. I need you to think about what that's going to look like. Where are you going to be in 2027? How are you posturing your unit to look in 2027, 28, 29, 30? Because it's relevant and it matters. All right, if you've got the mission vision paper there that was in one of your handouts. I truly believe fundamental responsibility to provide the Army with fully manned, trained, and ready units prepared to fight and win our nation's wars. That means, and Richie, I'm going to give you about 5-10 minutes at the end of this to talk recruiting. That means to me the focus, of course, on our federal mission. We can't stop thinking about the federal mission. Philosophically, I'm a firm believer that if you can do everything Headquarters, Department of the Army says you need to be able to do from a mission essential task standpoint, you can do any mission. That doesn't mean we don't train for the domestic mission, but I am saying right now, heavy focus on the war fight, the things and the skills that have atrophied when we start talking about large-scale combat, right? When you start talking about combat at scale and those things, and I've got a lot of data to show the Army, these are skills that have atrophied across the United States Army, not the Michigan Army National Guard. We have to figure out a way to get in front of that stuff. Prioritize resources to man our formations, right? Really looking at 2 metrics. 100% FSA. That means if you're authorized 100 people, I want you to at least have 100 people. And I want you to have more than 100 people. Because how many of those people, if I've got 100% FSA of the 4th of the Rudy Kazudi, how many of those people actually show up for drill? 60, 70, maybe, right? We have pipelines. We have, 5 or 10 cadets who don't count, all those things. And I'm talking about deployability, which brings me to the second metric, right? So P2. I want us to focus on P2 CUSR metrics, company commanders. What does the C stand for in CUSR? Company commanders, don't raise your hand, another rhetorical question. Do you review your USR and provide your own commander's edits? If you don't, you need to, right? That is not an NCO-led USR. I know who's going to build it and put it together. I'm tracking. You got to own that thing. Battalion commanders, you got to own it. Company commanders with AA formations, that's your report. You are reporting through, ultimately, we've all heard the president reads USRs. I'm not going to tell you that. I will tell you 3 stars. If you're a CRF unit, absolutely are reading that thing. The Army G3 is reading it and providing us feedback to the tag. Man your units to P2, right? So we're talking about things like deployability, senior grade deployability, MOSQ. Does this mean I want you to not look at anything else? No, it does mean I'm not going to ask companies, battalions, and MSCs to provide this top 8 roll-up and all these. It's a good information pool, but I can pull that stuff at the state level. A lot of the things that I need to see, I'll have that guy right there, John Keelan and his team. The the G3, Colonel Prater, pull them up with her team, and we'll see what those are, right, as we look at indicators inside formations. But what I don't want you to do is you know, just think that I'm going to have another on top of. This is in lieu of, and we will build what that thing looks like. We got a report that's being generated now with the Patterson element. Hey, as far as how we prioritize, right? The prioritization, you see it in the document. I'm going to stick with those prioritization of resources when I start manning formations, equipping formations, providing resources through the G3-4 formation. GIF map requirements aren't going away. We just had the 107th, the 125 rolled back from Syria. The 107th is about to come back. You know, we're pushing the 272 out. Those requirements don't go away, right? I do think they're going to scale down a little bit if we see more conflict tick up in the other regions. CRIF. That's a requirement that goes back to what we can provide the Joint Force, CRE, NGRF. You know, one of the challenges of the NGRF historically, and a lot of us lived this as we built these NGRF requirements, QRF and RF, was, yeah, we're putting all this energy into it and we never use them. Well, we used them, right, like every day for 2 years. The 210th was pretty much on a constant string for the better part of 2 years. So, yeah, we all know the value there. We want to make sure we resource them appropriately. And then consistent with rearm, right? I will make some exceptions if we look at units that are tasked with a CTC rotation, an ODT, a large one, right? A JTIMS level CTC or ODT rotation. Pathways, Defender, right? There's going to be some prioritization effort there. JRTC, NTC. The National Guard is down to 2 annually. CTC rotations, which is borderline criminal, and I'm tracking we have to compete with the active Army, but there's folks in this formation that will never see a CTC rotation. We want to try to get you in to see a JRTC. That's 1 each now annually between NTC and JRTC. If you start doing the math, 27 IBCTs, still centered on the IBCT. We know that 7 of them are A's or S's and will go to one place, and everybody else is going to be competing for the other place down south. So we might not have that opportunity. We want to maximize it when we do. Last line, Ming initiative supporting the future OE and LISCO will be integrated into training. That's a little bit in partnerships, interoperability. About 2016 or so, the Army published an exhort that said interoperability is really important. You should think about it. Company commanders should think about interoperability, battalion commanders, brigade commanders, and staffs. And I took that as guidance and literally and started driving it. I was the Deputy 3 at the time, to get us a little more engaged with some of the partners and build other partnerships. The lesson being, we don't want to deploy to a theater and that is then the first time we engage with a partner, or the first time a company commander has the opportunity to work with a Five Eye partner, a NATO partner, an ally, or more of an informal relationship with an Indo-PACOM partner. The first time they do any of that stuff, or more importantly, your soldiers do it, it shouldn't be when you're in contact, right? That's not a good time to learn something. We all learned that the hard way, and we don't want to do that to this generation of soldier growing up. So if you can integrate some of those things, if you can integrate some of the training, you're going to hear me talk a lot about commo and communications and resilience and the things that we have to do to communicate effectively in LISCO. It's not going to be as simple as it was, right? We did not have to fight previously in COIN with any of that stuff. We could set up retrans wherever we wanted. We could put things in the sky. You're not going to be able to do that, right? You're fighting in Ukraine right now with the Ukrainian tactical network largely enabled, in some cases Starlink, in some cases not, with end user devices. It probably looks like a cell phone that has some sort of TAC software, right, that gives you the same COP as whatever that shooter is, sensor, shooter, prosecuted target, BDA, and it comes back on the same device. And maybe it's a laptop, maybe it's a tablet. It's a resilient architecture. All the white noise of what's happening around it may mask it, may not. Think about how far behind we are from a commo standpoint, right? Raise your hand if your unit's fielded ITN in the Army. None of you will, because we haven't, right? Everybody else on Compo 1 has, pretty much. We've had 2 units in, I think 2 in the Guard that have. So we're going to get to Gen 1 integrated tactical network, and then we're going to be on Gen 5 or something completely different in the Army. Right? And they're already moving away from all that stuff, and that's where I want you to start thinking. I want you to use the systems you have. Yes, you should be smart on them. But I am not a big fan, and will always push back when I see units moving server stacks into the field, which are not survivable, which are not mobile, and fighting that way in a hard stand CP. Right? You have to think through what this looks like. I'd love to see, I told the staff, the commanders, 2 years from now, I'd like to see a whole rotation of Northern Strike fought off of cell phones. End-to-end encryption with a cloud-based network, zero trust that I can parse out and send data to you, prosecute a target, and keep fighting that way. Because you're going to fight with what you got. Ukraine confirmed it. Taiwan's doing it right now in their prep. All right, philosophy, people are the pacing item. That is how I feel, right? The people in this formation are how we're going to be successful or not successful. So how are you managing your people? What are you doing to train your people? If you look at that philosophy and vision statement, you can parse out pretty easily the core functions, right? For organize, man, equip, train, you can see man, train, equip inside that first paragraph. So that's a priority effort, manning our formations. I want you to think about that, commanders and first sergeants. Manning your formation. Implied in there, you understand what's in that roster. You can battle roster, look at it. Every soldier, company commander should have fingertip feel, first sergeant, fingertip feel for your formation. Every single slot. And right now we don't. You should understand how to stabilize and protect those formations when you hit them, when you hit any level of training proficiency. That should be a CCIR to you, company commander, if somebody wants to break that thing up. And you should have that picture, you should have that cop everywhere you go. I don't care how you do it. If it's, MRE box and a grease pencil, if it's in a green notebook, if it's a digital cop, whatever it is, you better understand how to man your formation, because ultimately when the time comes, you're not going to have time to get them where they need to be. Put them there now, stabilize them, and move out. Taking care of soldiers, train them for the future fight. Don't misinterpret that as meaning that we forget about everything else, right? I'm not telling you, I don't want to, Colonel Wagh said, don't do a 5960 because he wants us to train. Yeah, you can still do that, right? I don't live in a binary world, and none of us do, right? It's never an either or. We've all turned into that. I've had this argument with people about metric success and training. It's crazy, but I can do both. I can still have a unit that metrically is healthy because I can manage things, right? Because I have great NCOs and leaders who can do that stuff. Training soldiers, the best thing you do to take care of soldiers is train them. That's what I mean. Because you're not going to have the time to train them for the next fight. I'm not training you. I'm not preparing you. I'm not planning for the last war, right? I don't think that way. I think about the next war. So knowing that, if we had to call up and even remotely resemble the current tip FID, then I'm gonna get them trained now. I want them trained at fundamental, 10-level proficiency through platoon. Focus on that stuff now. That's taking care of soldiers, and that's preparing them for that fight. Now, if we do this right, I also believe if we train them right and people see it, we, the Army enterprise, the Joint Enterprise, the DoD, partners and allies, then that decision for those 3 criteria, that's going to be shifted to the right every day. And we want his next day to say, no, not today. When I wake up, when he wakes up tomorrow, we want him to say, nope, today is not the day. We're not ready to do an assault of Taiwan or wherever else. We want to wait another day. And our ability to train soldiers, I firmly believe, if we all take that attitude, 54 states and territories, Compo 1, Compo 2, Compo 3, Marine Corps, Army, Navy, Air Force, with our partners, we'll push that decision cycle further and further. Warfighting has to permeate all we do. I talk a lot about this, first-person leadership. I think it was General Nevin when I first heard that term, first-person leadership. General Flynn talks about face-to-face and win. Somebody talked about, I think Sergeant Major Russell talked about the other day about, get out of your chair and get out and see. And it's amazing what you see when you start walking through formations and go out in the units. So getting out and talking to your units, and really this is battalions and MSCs I'm talking to. You're going to see some of that from us as well with the staff. Individual through platoon readiness, delivering at the point of need. You notice when I talk about transformation and modernization, so we have a rearm requirement. We're going to meet that. That's our equipping focus to make us look like Compo 1 so we can be interoperable. Step one of interoperability is with your war trace, legacy term, BCTs, battalions. Step two of interoperability is your, I don't know what that was. Step two of interoperability is in your compo, and step three of interoperability is in your service, right, with the Army. Step four, then we get into joint and multinational, and a lot of folks are struggling with that right now. We're getting it after at least twice a year with TAC 1 and 2 in Northern Strike. A good place to test it. Cohesive teams at echelon and coalescing around the profession. That's me saying the things that are tearing apart formation, sexual assault, sexual harassment, suicide, all those things that we talk about. And I still talk to soldiers and say, they gave me a PowerPoint slide. We're missing the boat if the conversation about sexual assault in the post-Vanessa Guillen era is a PowerPoint slide. That's absurd to me, right? Bless you. We should be talking about how do we stop this and get these folks out of our formations and address it and attack it and move on. I don't want any soldier. Here's your litmus test. First sergeants and commanders, your litmus test. Is every soldier in your formation, PV1 to whatever, senior grade, comfortable and wants to walk in that armory any time of day and knows that that's part of the family, right? If they're not, you have a problem, you should address it. You need and will address it immediately. So those behaviors right there, that's what takes all our time away from the things we need to be doing. Building teams that can fight and win in combat. You talk about fundamentals, you see me talk about fundamentals matter, should be mastered before we progress in training workups. Fundamentals to me are not sleeves and grass, they're just not. Fundamentals are 10-level proficiency with every weapon system in your MTO. 10-level proficiency, 20-level proficiency with every communication system in your MTO. That's fundamentals to me. Understanding your own battle drills, right? TC3. There are lots of people walking around our formation today who are alive because CLS actually worked, right? A lot of people in our formations. Some of them are in this room. So don't miss the fundamentals. All right, strategic direction. I talked a little bit about the 100% FSA at echelon. The line that I want you to key in on there, RRB, is a supported command. I'm going to hold RRB accountable and push RRB hard, right? Colonel Sands is coming in. Lieutenant Colonel Corner did a great job, Jason Type. Colonel Sands is coming in. I do want RRB to be a second command. So we're focused on recruiting and not, figuring out command things. But I'm looking at MTO commanders, NTDA commanders in terms of manning your formation. Here's the difference, right? Alpha Company, 1st to the 504th, and the 82nd. That company commander has zero ability to impact who comes into that formation. That's directed from personnel debt at the division level that filters through the brigade, and you get some requirement, and it's based on things like DRF and all that stuff. The difference is, as a company commander here in Big Rapids, where I was as a company commander, I could go and did find people and say, I'll put you in this unit. You want to be you want to be a hooligan? Come on down. I'll put you in, and I'll drop you in tomorrow to a recruiter who was my partner inside that formation, inside that armory in Big Rapids, and we put him in the unit. That's the expectation with command teams, right? You have to be engaged. We had 20 years of the GWAT. We were told to do what we did. All of you were part of that, and you did great. It pulled us out of the communities, all right? And right, understandably so, right? We can look back and know why. We have to get back in, and there are indicators. Some units continue to do well. I always default to the UP when I look at tight, close formations. But I look at the things that, even relationships, the Boy Scouts, we had Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, we had 6 years or so where we had any meaningful interaction with what was helping us fill our formations. JROTC, we're pushing that now. Should have been there all along. These are things that we can find people with the propensity to serve. I'm super interested in exploiting the current condition, which is most of us that are serving, privates joining the Army, have a familial relationship, right? 80% or so know somebody who wears this thing. I'm really interested, and this is for me to figure out with some of the smart folks, of all the other folks who otherwise meet those criteria, are medically capable, could serve, but don't want to because they have nothing tying them to this profession. I want to find those people, those populations that we haven't targeted, penetrated, get them in, explain to them, show them, and pull them into the formation. You can talk a little bit, you can see a little bit about 100% FSA. I'm going to overdrive a few things. Recruiters, we're all recruiters, every one of us, but warrant officers, commissioned officers, I think we're missing. We need to start stacking people. You should be stacking cadets inside your formation. Worst case, you give a future officer a great experience. They go to Compo 1. They always anchor on that great experience they had in the Guard and come back potentially. Best case, you get somebody that commissions in your formation. Have a plan for them, put them in, and stack them up. P2 manning at battalions. The line about the battle roster scrubs. Another thing that I will be speaking a lot about. So, MTO formations, priority fill. You can see how we want to address it. I put ARIP on there. You're going to hear a lot about a battalion readiness workshop. I'm saying this to the battalion commanders. Battalion commanders, you're going to have the JFHQ staff descend on your formation. That's a OPR, will be the G1 with the 3 in support. They're not coming down to poke at the battalion. MSCs, of course, are part of this, and particularly the 420s and those senior HR folks that I want to have, so we're all on the same page, right? Back to the partnership. The scrubs will happen at battalion level, bottom up with readiness NCOs and teams from the units, and then top down with the MSC, but we'll be down there with our folks, so the Pattersons and the Chief Kinneys of the world can talk through some TTPs, ways to see the formation, and ways for you to manage your battle roster the right way, proactively. Right now, we did a ballpark. If we were where we need to be, we probably have 200 to 300 junior enlisted soldiers who'd be promoted tomorrow if we put them in the right spot and did the right transaction in IPSA. Right? We have excess challenges. We're not managing our excess. We're not pulling the people out. We're not putting the right people in. We're not creating vacancies by managing excess the right way like we should for somebody who is not deployable. You can do a lot, and we owe you that training side. We're going to start by, I told Colonel Keelan, by the end of Q2, every battalion formation will have this readiness workshop executed. Pull them in and hold them accountable when they come into your formation. Because we owe you that same thing. Retention. I'm gonna shave off a couple points with the retention metrics, right? Throw a little bit more stress, 2% or so with our current retention plan, because I saw we can and have been retaining soldiers, and I want to make it a little more challenging. And the same thing with RSP. If you can drop 2% off your RSP pipeline, you'll be like top 10 nationally. RSP soldiers. They've got control, and by the way, I'm open for change. We're going to talk some change at some point, but right now what I want you to do is, with your recruiting, local company command, battalion commander, talk about how we can manage those RSP folks. We have had units in the past who've taken commanders, first sergeants down and managed to engage RSP soldiers, and we have marked improvement, metric success improvement on pipeline loss reduction, because we're talking to them, and the conversation usually goes something like this. Hey, future 10 level kid, what's going on? Oh, sir, I'm not sure I did the right thing. This really scares me. I don't want to do this. Well, what do you want to do? I'd rather drive a truck. Okay, we'll make an 88 Mike. Like, that's a true story. Yes, survey size of 1, but I have more to share. So I want you to engage on that side as well, and think about how you can do it. Hey, senior grade manning, you can see the line. I'll keep it simple with NCOs. We have got to maximize the talent pool and open the aperture. I have seen a lot of really good NCOs that left the Guard in the past 10 years or so that weren't even given an opportunity to apply for a position. And I'll be talking in detail with the senior NCOs. I've posted, my senior NCO position, and I think we're boarding sometime around Thanksgiving. I can't remember. Sometime soon, but in the meantime, I want to open the aperture, and I want to do that same thing with the officers. Officers, you're going to hear me speak a lot about basic fundamental things that I want your FAMs to run, which means we have to have a plan for the FAMs, because we don't. And we also individual responsibility of understanding what you need to do with your proponent, right? You should know what it means to be a KD complete officer. That shouldn't be a surprise to you, and as it has been when I've said, I don't want you to do this broadening tour because you're not even KD complete for your grade. Well, what should I do? I don't know. You probably figure out what that means, right? I shouldn't be talking to field grades about KD tours. So get in and understand with your proponent. Cause I'm saying that because it's not the same. A 90 alpha, 04, 11 alpha, 04, 31 alpha, 04. Different requirements. Generally, 03 or 04 rather, XOS3 time, but not always the same. You might need, SPO. Maybe you are a SAMS grad. I can put you in a different staff position. You'll be KD. But know what that means. When I look at broadening tours for MDay, AGR, I don't care. I'm going to look at that first, right? And I'm going to look at folks that have excelled, which means we know how to write reports, which we are not doing a good job of right now. Second commands, managing the formations. You're going to hear me talk a lot about stability. I want you company commanders to think about how do you stabilize your formation. Battalion commanders, how do you stabilize your formation? Everybody, right? Green tab position is important. Full-time staff, keeping in positions. I got to figure out some of this. The staff is working as well, but and the last thing is selecting the right people for battalion command. There's a note in there about BCAP. Does anybody not know what BCAP is? Battalion Command Assessment. So the Chief of Staff, former, a few years ago, General McConville said, why are we putting more energy and effort into assessing a private into the Ranger Regiment than we are a battalion commander? It's a great question. It's a great question. And I can't replicate the BCAP process per se, but what I can do is pool everybody that wants to be a battalion commander. One, get further left of that chain so we identify them early, get them through PCC, all that stuff, but also have an assessment process and evaluation process where I get a touch point with a battalion commander, wants to be a battalion commander, and roll through some of this stuff. And bring our BH professionals in, and bring our inventory personality assessments in, do those kind of things. We're going to do that, giving it to RTI to think through it. G1's got a piece of this, of course, but more to follow. And then full-time staff, we talked about, I owe you that, stabilization. You can see the ends, right? Individually ready. I talk a little bit about competition, crisis, conflict. You should be thinking about where we are now. You should be thinking about the things that our partners are thinking about. When we do deploy, if you're looking at it purely from your context and competition, remember, our competition might be our partner's crisis or conflict. Here's a case study, Latvia. Is Latvia in competition right now with Russia? No, absolutely not. They're straight up crisis, right? And they share a border with Belarus, right? And weaponized migration on the border. And all the things on the cyber and space side that Russia's doing, right? They're far beyond competition, but you should be thinking about that because you're going to see those triggers. Raise your hand if you're an intel officer, right? All of you should spend as much time with those cats as you can, right? Indicators and warnings, that's where they live. That's the things that they see, right? I've always philosophically felt like every officer, regardless of AOC basic branch, should be an amateur writer, intel, and commo officer. So if you're 25, raise your hand. More people you need to talk to. And I talk a little bit about how we will transition and when we transition to crisis, where the focus will be, but we're not there yet. So right now, manning. I talk strategic competition. By the way, the great power competition, that's a legacy term if you haven't read lately. You can see back to we're not in a binary world. Individual readiness, training, focus, fundamentals. You see the big five for individual: shoot, move, communicate, medicate, fight, and win. And I've talked marksmanship, PT. TC3 is incredibly important to me. Using the commo systems you have, but not being afraid to change things, right? If you're a battalion commander, leave your stacks behind, throw up a couple LMTVs, grab some Humvees, and set up a CP and be mobile and be smart about it. And camouflage it and use it the right way. T3 is our standard. What level are we resourced at in the Army Guard from a training standpoint? Anybody besides the three? Eddie, what level are we resourced at? 39 days. What's that buy you? Buys you platoon level readiness. The Army says, I'm resourcing you for platoon level readiness. Battalion commanders, who owns platoon readiness? What level, how deep do I look? Battalion commanders, 2 levels down. 2 levels down. Who owns squad readiness and training? Company commanders, right? Company ex-eval, that's planned by a company commander with a first sergeant, giving him advice, her advice. It's evaluated. You can figure out how to evaluate it. You plan, resource it, you execute it. Battalions, 2 levels down, right? You're looking at platoon. So when I say your resource at platoon level, back to implied tasks, battalion commanders, when you read that line, you should be thinking, I have to look hard at how am I manning my platoons. Manning starts because I can't train if I'm not manned. What am I doing to resource them and evaluate them? 2 levels down. Brigade commanders, where are they looking? Company, 2 levels down. If I say focus on platoon training, does that mean we never exercise a company or a battalion CP? No, because how do we do that? How do we get after that? What's that word that rhymes with multi-echelon? Right? If you're doing a platoon live fire, company commanders, you can still manage to run a company CP, and you can battle track, and you can report, and you can build a fires plan, and you can do all this stuff constructively. And you might ask for the battalion. I've yet to find the battalion commander when a company commander says, hey, sir, I'm really looking forward to this thing that I'm doing at the platoon level. Would you mind doing a little response cell, help give me some feedback, maybe set up the staff? I mean, no, we're never going to do that. We don't want to train you. Of course that's not going to happen. I'm telling you it should be planned, right? If you tell that battalion commander, if you tell A.J. Shabala this morning to do that tonight, you'll probably get an earful, but I'll still bet you he'll figure out a way to support you. You should be thinking multi-echelon at all time. I've been asking some folks about multi-echelon training, and I don't think we know what it means, right? So I can exercise a whole bunch of levels at the same time, resourcing that primary training event and still get after a whole bunch of other stuff. And I am open. Like, you want to talk about this stuff, I'll talk training all day, right? Grab me, give me a cell phone call, and we'll go get coffee and talk through it for hours. Painful, long hours. CPs, doctrinal distances. You can see where I'm going with how I want you to train and fight from a mission command standpoint, right? Mission command, and I'm really talking about not so much, I am a huge believer in mission command as a philosophy, but I'm talking about mission command, the C2 component, ones and zeros of how you communicate effectively. You've got to do both. We can do both. You can see a few things on NCOs, and I'll keep it simple. I want your NCO DPs, and you really should be talking about LDPs, right? We're all leaders together, to be focused on the war fight. Tactical echelon war fight, as you get up into senior NCOs, bring it up to the next level. But if somebody talked to me about NCOERs as an LDP, which to me is your JOB, I'm not going to spend time, precious time in the field. That's something you got to be doing every day. Mentorship, providing that guidance. Same thing with OERs. Learning how to write those things. Officers, you can see the same. The last thing about NCOs, rather, you can see the all caps I put in there for a reason. NCOs buy down risk for commanders by positioning themselves at points of friction and transition. That could be on a staff requirement, and we're an MDM where we see that point where the staff's not working. That's an ops NCO, ops sergeant major. That could be at a rifle squad level, going for a KLE in a building when you're on a patrol and you're going to transition from the outside, dismount, and get into a building. NCO owns that thing. The officer's worried about the KLE, the outcomes, all that stuff, right? Transitions, you buy down risk. The biggest way to buy down risk in a formation is to keep the NCOs engaged at every level of planning through execution and hold them accountable. And they'll hold you accountable, trust me. Officers, company level and field grade. Again, tactical level proficiency for our officers, our company grades. Stabilize them, make them do the things, make them brief orders, do the writing. Quick note on writing. We need some work on writing. Who's done an FSLP program? Yeah, there's a few of you. Who here thinks Matt Rollins is an easy grader? Richie does, yeah, of course. So, you know, we had this guy that's a retired 05 grading folks to do this, which, you know, we can't do one this year. We're very resource constrained, I'll say. Colonel Prater's like, don't even say it. But the writing needs some work, and I'm looking at OERs, right? Hey, if you're a senior rater, what are the 4 things you need to have? What are the 4 components in your OER? Enumeration, schools, promotion, almost. Next assignment. Good job, Nathan. I've read senior rater bullets that are paragraph narratives, right? So especially when you start grade commanders, you start field grade senior rating. Battalion commanders, thinking about it now, but you start with your company commanders. Teach them how to write. And I will do a little pull-in and have some folks come in maybe on a lunch and just talk through OER stuff, NCOER stuff. I will tell you, OERs and NCOERs, if I'm rating and senior rating you, your performance will be evaluated in part by your ability to provide a timely OER or an NCOER to the person you're rating. If you can't give them an OER or NCOER, I'll make sure it's reflected in yours, as it should be, because you owe them that. That NCO is going in front of a board, right? And she may need that OER, NCOER for that board. And shame on us if we put somebody in front of a board and we say, three reports missing, right? That's completely unacceptable. So just know I'm not going to spend a lot of time looking at it. It's going to be through actions. We talked a little about the ways that I won't go through because I know I'm coming close on time, but you can see our numbers there with RRB. That's a supported command. What I want you to do metrically to man your formations, retain your formations. Stabilization is the one I'm struggling with a little bit. I'm trying to stabilize green tab and full-time assignments because intuitively we know, right, if I'm rotating supply sergeants every 6 months, we're going to have a hard time with excess management, for instance. But I do think we owe you a plan to do so. As we get into means, this will get you back into the communities and some of the things I want you to think through. We had an event, I think it was last week with or 2 weeks ago, whatever, the Kalamazoo, the culinary event. Is Nathan DeWitt in here? Yeah, so 1,500 quartermaster. Getting them out and trying to man that formation, right? And getting folks exposed to that formation. We picked up some leads. RRB did a great job with the 631st, the 1,500. But my point is, we met a lot of folks who said, we don't even have recruiters. We got moved out. Hey, would you want to come back in? Some of them were schools that have actively pushed back on you being in their school and talking to those kids, right? So that's the kind of thing we want to get back to do and to engage at that level and ideally build long-term relationships as we get through this thing. So look at your means. This is not an all-inclusive list, nor is it designed to constrain you. Right? This is a pretty broad, and by the way, it's called initial guidance because guidance changes as conditions change. We get to the point where we start looking at what I'm calling phase 1, which is protect what I got. I can't put up IEW, I can't put Gray Eagle or even talk about an MDTF or BCT if I'm middling. And that number you saw yesterday, wherever we were nationally, I don't even care because it's not accurate because we still have, hey, how many more discharges do we have?
We're down to 191.
Okay, so we were like 400. They can't process them fast enough because what used to be a SID PERS, 1,000 a day type of thing, IPSA is not your friend. It takes some time, which means we have to do a better job of managing it at my level. I am not going to smash anybody on a negative end strength number if I'm holding discharges from March. Right? I'm committed to processing them in a timely manner. I can assume a little bit of risk with some RSP folks to try to balance the numbers, but I'm not going to sit on a DAT failure for as long as he can process, as fast as he can process it, right? So we owe you that, and I hear you when you talk about that from your standpoint. Closing with risk down there, protect what we got, and then we'll talk the next step and how we grow where we think we're going to go. I think the Army and the Army Guard The Joint Force, to some extent, over the next couple of years, are in for a pretty interesting turn. As you look at where we are from the economy, which does drive recruiting, if you look at where we are with the current generation, and I don't know that I've ever felt more separated from the, what are they? They're Gen Zs. Gen Z, millennial, I'm not sure what I think I'm a Gen X, but just I mean, I raised 3 of them, but I also raised 3 of them. That's probably not a good evaluation, right? Because I made them do what I thought was right. And that may not be the right thing for everybody, but understanding that, so the other piece, and I'll close this thing, and I'll pull Richie up. The other piece is, I'm going to try to invest some resources into, I'm going to invest resources into understanding some of these folks that I'm talking about. The soldiers, the potential soldiers who aren't related to you. I got 3 kids, 2 of them ended up putting a uniform on. I never said a word to them. I'll bet all of you have the same things. And those kids, we still need them, right? And we need the kid that wants to go to Omaha Beach and slay the Hun and do all that stuff. We need it. You have to have those people that want to jump out of a plane on the St. Mare and go to war. But we also need people that are really smart with IT. And we also need people who are really, really smart with analysis and who can obtain a TS clearance. We need people who can turn a wrench. We need people who can get into the trades. I got 2, engineer battalions, and holy cow, the track. We got to find all these other folks as well, and we got to find them from populations that aren't related to us, that may think there's some bias, and ask them why. What would change that bias? How do I pull you in? How do I get you into this formation? Understand the goodness that comes from being a member of the Michigan Army National Guard. All the things you do, teamwork, cohesion. Those are things, universal values, that I think if we can communicate them effectively, and I think we got the people now to do it, that I think we'll pull some people in. So looking forward to moving this thing with you, with all of you. I say, it makes everybody nervous. If you have a question, please let me know, right? I love talking to NCOs and leaders. I'm going to get out and about. Like priority 1 for me, Manning. How do I enable that? It's getting out and talking to you, right? I don't know what's happening in the Big Rapids Armory today. I don't know what's happening in the Sioux, and I don't know what's happening down in Dowagiac, but I'm going to figure it out by going out and talking to you and having those engagements, okay? Questions of me, and we're going to do breakouts and rotate, and I'll be in one, so I'll have everybody to touch in a smaller formation. What questions? Go ahead, Sergeant Major.
Sir, on the cadets, you seem that each unit seems to do a different way of utilizing cadets. What would you look at as far as utilization of cadets in unit, and would you differentiate between what year they're in?
Yeah, that's a great question from one of the most candid people in our formation, right? So, cadets to me, and keeping this, you stand where you sit, based on where I see things. I was an APMS at Michigan State. And so I was deeply involved with where cadets go and how I manage cadets. I've been a battalion commander, company commander, and I see it. Here's what I think with cadets. 1, they're free. 2, exactly what you said. And, I think we can drive. I don't want to be too constrictive with how I apply that to a unit. I do think I owe you a framework. This is what I think. And I know Tina Corner, somebody's taking notes right now. What I owe you is, this is the pathway for an MS1, a freshman cadet. Gets out of basic training, OSUT, they're in your formation, and I've seen good units, and here's how the best unit I ever saw do this. They had a plan for MS1s that kind of looked like you're a soldier. You need to learn how. You need to hump the saw or the 240. And you had a few touch points over the course of that drill weekend with the PL and the company commander one-on-one. What are you doing? What are you studying? Why are you majoring in that? That's dumb. What do you want to do? What's your grade point average? Oh, well, 2.0, you're not going to have any options. You're going to go where the Army tells you, right? And I've had conversations with some of these kids, some of the MSU kids one-on-one, and conversation with professors and moms and dads. You want to see a kid turn red, bring the mom in for a counseling session. I did that. MS1 plan, MS2. This is where the soldier, the cadet has graduated, and not an NCO, I didn't say that, but you integrate them with and they work with E5, E6. What does a squad leader, team leader do? Accountability, how do you take care of your, suppress, report, deploy on a live fire, the things a squad leader's thinking about. Here, hey, you know what, here's why I don't need you riding me, because this is what I'm thinking about as a weapons squad leader during a live fire or in contact. Kids like, holy cow, right? You get into the 3s and 4s, you turn them into platoon leaders. Shadowing, make them brief in order, make them right. Make them right. I don't care if they have homework, they should. This is also part of the process of being a member of our formation. Make them right. Make them brief in front of their leadership. Make them spend time, 3s and 4s especially, the juniors and seniors, with the first sergeants, the platoon sergeants, the battalion CSM. Get that perspective. That person graduates and they will be a much better platoon leader for it. And part of our sales pitch to ROTC battalions is we have data that shows a good SMP program equals metric success at advanced camp equals better for you in MSU, Central, Eastern, Western, Michigan. So I think we owe you a framework, Sergeant Major. We will. But I also want to give you the flexibility because I know a sapper company is going to do things different than an EVCC, than an MP company. But I think the basic message is have a plan, use them accordingly, right? Treat people like all soldiers with dignity and respect, and don't put them in a broom closet, because that's the other thing I've seen, right? And I did a lot of BFC as an APMS 2 units, and why are these kids shoved away and told to do homework? And I did. I pulled them out and I put them in other units and stacked them up. Okay, next question. All right, I have a read, watch, and listen list that is, here's what I learned as a brigade commander, that because I was blinded and didn't think, and I was making everybody a little mini version of me, which is the last thing I want. I like to read. And somebody heard me earlier asked about Barbara, or a book to read. Like, if you want to read a book right now, read The Guns of August, Barbara Tuchman, right? That's the book that when you read it, you're going to think, this is all the seminal World War I. And everybody's, oh, why do I talk about, trust me. Read this book and you're going to think a lot of it looks like 2023. Indicators and warnings and things that, ironically, that book's not on my reading list. But so I put a list together of books that I think are good for leaders. I need to kind of frame it out by company. It sort of is with field grades, all leaders. But I also added knowing that not everybody wants to read, and that's okay. A lot of them, podcasts. I've got 5 or 6 go-to podcasts. If you don't like to read, I can't change you. I hope you do read. But if you want to do nothing else, throw in a 30-minute podcast on the commute. School of War, MWI, one of those, and I've got that on the list. And that's a great way to professionally develop yourself. And then the watch list is the same thing. Movies, some of which are really valuable and can provide some insight. And if you frame them, like a warfighting function or mission command, master and commander, right? Nobody wants to talk about the Navy. Awesome movie for mission command. And then I've got a YouTube list of like Army University Press. There's a few things that back to knowing your doctrine. If you don't want to read FM 3-90, maybe you pull up University Press and just get the XSUM. I'd rather you do that for 20 minutes than say, I don't know what that is and I don't have time to read it, right? And there's a lot of other that I'll publish this. I'll put it out through the, here's what I'll do. I'll shoot it out to the MSC commanders, and then they'll blast it to you. And if you don't get it, let me know. So yeah, always be developing yourself, reading, watching, listening to something, and download a couple podcasts when you fly, and you'll have a good leg up on the competition. The balance is, here's what I think I owe you. If you signed up for 39 days and you're in a statutory year, I think I owe you 39 days. Now, we have a YTB cycle where commanders tell me, I want to do a Supermuta, let's throw that out there. And I'll tell you this, my theory on Supermutas, because I've actually done the data pool. I was a brigade OIC in the 177th, queried the entire brigade. I did it as a brigade commander. We did something in the 126 too. And I was about 80% of the formation really liked the large. When I was a brigade commander, we drilled once a quarter, right? We did muted 12s once a quarter. That's what we did. Everybody wanted it except one battalion that had all my docs and PAs, and it wasn't ideal. So you know what I let them do? I let them drill every month. So step one is commanders have a conversation and understand and demonstrate flexibility and empathy with your leaders and soldiers. Not every one of them. I can't tailor everything, but I think you owe them what you signed up for. Now, I still haven't seen the unicorn that is the guardsman that does 39 days a year. I haven't found that person. The NCO, every NCO has PME, all that stuff. You can do it, but I think commanders owe you that. And if that soldier can't do it, I think you need to have a dialogue and not just, well, you're going to do it or get out. And back to, we don't live in a binary world. Nuance and context matter, right? These soldiers have jobs. You know, I've been in the full-time force for a decent chunk now, but the first 9 years or so, 8 years, I was an MDay running a plant, trying to deploy a unit to Iraq and be a plant manager. And I would have days where I would just say, hey, production manager, you got it, man. I'm going to be locked up. You got guard stuff? I got guard stuff to do. I was super, super lucky and fortunate and blessed to have an employer who believed in that, who could have said, no. You got a job to do. Go do it. I'm not paying you to do that. I want you to have that conversation. So, one, understand the conditions. Two, it's an individual dialogue. One size does not fit all. If you're not counseling at that level, commanders, first sergeants, obviously at echelon, then I think we're missing a huge opportunity. These are what our soldiers do. When you tell soldiers to deploy, you know, they've always gone and answered the call, always. But if you can minimize that stuff in the down years, and a lot of that's on us, on me, to minimize the change of 75 YTB changes that I direct over the next 12 months, right? And I'm going to look pretty hard at YTB changes from commanders. If you're coming at, if you told somebody that's a soldier in your formation that they drill in, you know, these dates in August, and then you take them out and you're going to do it, and I'm going to have a conversation with you. And I know things change. You might have got a NOS, right? But it's going to be exigent circumstances that drive that. So communicate effectively at every echelon, but help give soldiers what they signed up for and to do. And some of those solutions may not be what you want to hear. Some of those solutions may be, let's find you a unit, maybe it's a TDA, a little more predictable. I'd rather put that soldier in that unit and keep them and let them keep their benefits than say, well, get out, right? Because that's dumb.